Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eugene Stefanov, and I'm part of the marketing team at Perficient. I am very excited to be moderating today's webinar, Improve Medical Product Information Sharing with Virtual Agents. First things first, if you're having trouble hearing this session, please make sure your volume is turned all the way up. If you're having any other issues, feel free to drop me a line in the chat box. We are recording this session, so you will have another opportunity to watch it. We will also email you with information on how to access this recording within the next few days. And finally, time permitting, we will answer questions at the end of the session. So if you do have them during today's presentation, please enter those into the questions box, not the chat box. So in a moment, I'll hand it over to our speakers, but first, let me give you a quick overview of Perficient. So Perficient is a leading global digital consultancy with unparalleled strategy and technology capabilities. We have numerous locations across the US and Europe, as well as nearshore and offshore delivery centers in Latin America, Eastern Europe, India, and China. Founded in 1997, we're a public company that's traded on the NASDAQ, and we have approximately 6,000 employees. And we have strategic partnerships with major technology vendors and also have dedicated solution industry practices. And so one of these industry practices is, of course, life sciences. This slide shows our depth of experience. You can see that we've worked with more than 150 pharma, biotech, medical device, and CROs. And you'll also notice the diverse set of capabilities that we have, which really enable us to support you end to end. All right, now that I've covered the housekeeping items and told you a little bit about our company, I'd love to turn the call over to today's speakers so that they can introduce themselves. Welcome, Carrie, Prabha, and Nico.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Blejo Owens. I'm the Director of Pharmacovigilance, Safety, and Regulatory Affairs, which is one of the more unusual groups, I guess, within Perficient. My background is really not in technology so much as it is in pharma and in the CRO world, leading PV groups, regulatory responses, audits, the types of things that are good and bad with PV. And so I work hand in hand with our other cross-functional groups to deliver solutions that can accommodate this ever-growing monster of PV requirements.
Thanks, Carrie. Good morning, everyone. This is Prabha Ranganathan. I'm part of the life sciences team here at Perficient. I lead the life sciences delivery teams, which goes across various line of businesses, for example, the operations team, the warehousing, data management, safety, and our hosting team as well. I've been with Perficient for more than 6 years, and prior to that, I've been at a major product development company where I've developed and released solutions for the life sciences industry. Currently, my team and I are involved in various projects across the life sciences spectrum, as you've seen Eugene's slide presentation earlier. And we are also in strategic advisory roles at various companies. And happy to be here and start this conversation on medical information. Nico?
Thanks, Prabha. Hi, everyone. Nico Franzen. I'm a director of artificial intelligence at Perficient. Been at Perficient for over 9 years, and been part of our growing team of AI and ML consultants. for about 6 years now. So it's been a very fun journey to kind of see the growth of the technology and the adoption of it across all of our customers. And so very excited to talk to you today a little bit more about how to leverage AI in some interesting use case.
So this is Carrie. What we'll do today is really not get into an in-depth discussion about the technology, but this is more geared towards a high-level discussion about AI, natural language processing, and what are reasonable expectations of the technology at this point, and how it can be interspersed within your current practice. Also, I think it's important to look at the current challenges of call centers, both medical information and those call centers who collect adverse events and product quality complaints. Sometimes they're one and the same. To highlight some regulatory guidance that FDA and others have come out with, and I'm happy, I won't hit all of them, but I'm happy afterwards if you reach out to me to send you the package that I've been able to collect. And then to realistically take some real pain points that we know of that occur within a call center and look strategically at how artificial intelligence and automation and laying out that strategic roadmap can be done in a way that is efficient, that gets some immediate results and gets you a return on your investment. And then we'll end up, as Eugene said, with some questions and answers at the very end. So let's talk about the user or the caller, and that could be a healthcare professional, that could be a veterinarian, it could be a pharmacist, or it can just be somebody at home who is asking questions about their medications. And it's not limited to human medications. These regulations and these call centers hit other regulatory areas as well, nutritional supplements, veterinary pharma, over-the-counter. And FDA has put out some really good guidance around what call centers are expected to do. But how do people get their information today? They can search the web, certainly, social media, and FDA is starting to dip their toe in researching social media and monitoring that. They can ask people. They can call the contact center. But I mean, with each of these sources of information, there are some problems. People get frustrated with wait times, so they drop. They're not able to speak to the right person or the expert in whatever area that they're interested in. And there's a lot of confusion and frustration relevant to the accuracy and relevancy of the information depending on where you get it. And I think if we look back to 2020 and where we were then with COVID and where we are today, that is an excellent example of how information changes so very quickly and sometimes makes a full circle back around. So independent of this, we have some solutions and some suggestions on how you can leverage AI and NLP within your call center. So what about the challenges on the call center side? Anybody who's ever been or worked in a call center knows that it's really busy and it can get crazy busy. We know that you need to handle calls quickly and efficiently. You need to be empathetic to the caller. There's a problem always with wait times and dropped calls. People are instant. We're in a time where people don't always want to engage via voice, that they may text or they may use a web-based form or questionnaire to chat with someone. And the other issue is really scaling staff for unpredictable call volumes. Unfortunately, there are recalls. There are peaks and troughs depending on products. If you are in the influenza vaccine business, for example, you're going to be really busy about right now. You may not be so busy in the summer. So how do we make it work without necessarily adding new people and constantly going back and having to train people? Collecting adverse events and product quality complaints, being able to identify those and get all of the relevant information. And importantly, making the user experience for the healthcare provider or the patient a pleasant one where they say, oh, that was really helpful. Thank you. I would, absolutely, I'll call back. And one that a call center that has a flexible way to contact someone. Again, not everybody likes to pick up the phone where they hear your wait time is 2 hours. And then, layered on top of all of these other things is complying with the regulations and the considerations that FDA, EMA, Health Canada, and all the other regulatory agencies are now coming out and saying, these are the things that we expect from your call center, and being able to be agile and to flex so that you have the most relevant information. So I won't go into a lot of detail here on the regulations. I will say that there is a lot that has been published both by FDA and jointly by the traditional ICH. Probably the one that is has the most information, and again, if you'd like me to package these up and send them to you afterwards, I'm happy to do so. There's one on guiding principles of what can be said about a particular product to either a healthcare provider or a consumer or patient. It doesn't have to adhere to the approved labeling. There's some new guidances that are coming out from FDA about machine learning, about AI, about how to put all of this together, and about validation. We can't forget that all of these solutions that use AI and ML do have to undergo GXP. They're subject to GXP requirements. So how do we address all of these challenges? First of all, we want to be able to use something that is working for the individual call center. We don't want to come in and change everything. If it's working, what we want is a scalable and user-friendly platform, preferably one that can be used cross-functionally. There are some companies who have an animal health side, who have a human health side, divided up into different therapeutic areas. We want to be able to use good validation practices. We want to enhance the user experience with emerging technologies, and we want. And I think that's really the purpose of today's discussion is how do these things work and what kind of reasonable expectations can we set for today's technology that doesn't sound artificial, that has that more human feel so that people are happy at the end of the call. So Prabha, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
So this is an example of the customer interaction flow that we've been talking about when it comes to a medical information platform. So we have a wide range of customers, consumers, patients, caregivers, payers, providers, and others reaching out. And imagine an omni-channel platform where they can reach out and get information through any of the channels. It could be an email, it could be on the web, it could be a chat, it could be calling the call center. So this omnichannel platform would be first serviced by virtual agents. So the virtual agents will focus on getting the basic information that is needed to address the question or concern that is raised by the caller. And if the virtual agent determines that the caller is either requiring more detailed information which the virtual agent cannot provide, or the virtual agent cannot understand the conversation, can always escalate to frontline agent. The virtual agents can also be monitoring the call, analyzing the caller's reaction to the responses, and doing a sentiment analysis and decide whether this caller is frustrated with the call, and maybe somebody more specialized or a human should be answering the call. And another thing which these virtual agents can also be performing behind the scenes are, when the frontline agents or specialists are continuing the conversation with the caller, identifying proactively, basically predicting what other documents might be required to handle the conversation and having them ready for these agents so that they don't have to spend time searching for the details, and can be providing the information to the caller. Another example, a use case which the virtual agent will be assisting with is performing a sentiment analysis on the call and providing feedback to the humans answering the call with some details on whether the customer is happy or not happy, and how to adjust the call so that at the end they have happy customers. So these are some of the things which AI and ML technologies can help us with, making this a bit more conversation-friendly platform where, with multiple integrations, we also provide, say, for example, a doctor calls and wants some certain details for a medication and want that sent to their systems directly, building the integrations behind the scenes to ensure that the doctor is not spending time on the call, and providing the information directly to their EMR, for example. How do we build this integration? So not only the customer interaction flow is handled over here by the platform, but also providing a bit more integrations with other systems that will enable this to be a very user-friendly platform. While during the conversation, if the caller could be a consumer or an HCP, and the consumer, if it detects any product quality complaints or adverse events, then there would be corresponding integrations with the product quality system or to your safety system to send those details for further follow-up. So this is at a 10,000-foot level overview of this of the platform and how a customer interaction would work here. So with that, let me move on to some example conversation flows over here. So this is a simple conversation flow for an influenza vaccine. And within Perficient, we have a customer experience team whose primary focus is to make sure that the user experience of anything which we develop is the best that's available. So here, as you can see, the conversation is not very robotic, it's more human-like. So the user calls and says, initially our virtual agent respond with some greetings and say, for example, this is an influenza vaccine safety information platform. So it's first asking, are you a consumer or a healthcare provider? And once the response is given, it basically, you can see the prompts are all more humanized over here. It says, got it, how can I help you? And the user continues with some questions about some existing preconditions that they have. and analyzing that information, or virtual agent asks further questions. Did you get these vaccines before? Are you allergic to any ingredients? And once the user responds, it analyzes the information it got so far, and it understands that based on the information you provided, you're safe to get the vaccine. But do consult with your HCP as well if there are any other significant information or important treatment-related information that you may need. And then it either ends the conversation or continues the conversation asking, is there anything else I can help you with? So there are a few aspects in these conversational age elements that I would like to point out over here. That's primarily humanizing this experience. So if you notice over here, there are 4 examples which we have over here. The first one is it's asking, are you a consumer or a healthcare provider? Let's say, for example, this is a doctor or an RN, and they say, I'm a healthcare provider. So immediately the humanizer response is, thank you for working hard and to make our community safe and healthy. And this is, again, making sure that, the people contributing to the welfare of our society are thanked, and that is incorporated in the conversation. Another example here is a consumer calling and saying that, hey, my golden retriever threw up because of this medication that we had. Should I wait or give an additional dose? So now a robotic answer would have been, yes, give an additional dose, or no, whatever that response might be. But our customer experience focus is primarily have been being more empathetic to the conversation and saying, I'm very sorry to hear that, and let me see if I can find other information, and continues the conversation. Similarly, over here, we are looking at a patient who's calling, a doctor who's calling and saying, my patient is feeling tired after taking your wonder drug, and corresponding details are given. Not only the details, but additional documentations are provided to the caller to make sure that they have all the information that is needed to handle the situation. Here is an example where, the caller is stating that the temperature of the drug was not maintained correctly, might be an issue over here, and it immediately identifies this as a potential product quality complaint, and as, do you want to talk to a product complaint quality complaint group? And furthermore, it also asks, did you give this drug to any patient? Was this administered to any patients? And if it was administered, a system automatically detects that this is a potential adverse event and then sends it to the safety team as well. So these are the humanizing part which I wanted to highlight about a conversation, especially when you have a virtual agent responding to a human, adding such elements is going to make the user experience more pleasant and enjoyable. A sample, this is providing, if we have to build a system like this, how will we end up building a roadmap or implement the system? So what we are presenting here is, typically in such engagements, what we have is a phase 0 where we evaluate, gather, and collect all the requirements, ensure that your organizational needs are addressed in a prioritized manner or in an ordered manner. And then how will we, once we have a handle on the end-to-end system at a high level, how do we plan to release this? How do we plan the various phases and versions of the release and distribute that requirements and phase them out in an orderly manner so that you will have a workable solution released every few months, or depending on the frequency we have decided in phase 0. In this example, we are looking at a 3-month release for every version, and what all will be included in here. And if you factor in the regional aspects, the translations related to it, the multiple channels, how do we phase each channel into the release as part of our versions? How do we include regions? How do we make sure that your contents are converted to a conversational friendly mode so that those conversations can be defined and the customer experience team, along with the AI team, can define how the virtual agents would be responding to certain calls. So with that, let me move on to the various considerations and expectations that we need to factor in when we are building such a system. It's very important that we build a roadmap along with, all the stakeholders involved in it, so that there is a collaboration among the organization that's building a system like this. Our primary goal is how to make sure that our agents who are our valuable resources can handle the more important calls, high priority calls, rather than spending time on something which a virtual agent will be able to handle if there is some basic information, like, for example, side effects of a drug. If somebody wants to just call up and ask for what are the side effects of this drug, those might be readily available in your documents, and virtual agents should be able to handle it. But if there are more complex questions that would require a frontline agent or a specialist to answer, those resource times are well spent in handling such requests. So our overall goal is not to replace any humans using virtual agents, but making sure that our current team is enabled with the right tools and technologies to do their job even better. So how can machines assist humans to do this job better? And also understanding what can a virtual agent do and what are their limitations. It's very important when we are factoring in, when we are building a system like this and setting the expectations. Again, we are talking about all the emerging tools and technologies. Each one has its own limitations, and the level of training we give them determines how much they can handle. So it's not the magic bullet, just having AIs, machine learning, natural language processing, or building in automations. It's not the magic bullet, but then it depends on how well we incorporate them into our process and our standard procedures. And one of the key things which we need to be focusing on is, in the phase 0 of the roadmap, which we went through earlier, how do we make sure that all these are streamlined and released globally and phased out in a manner that our releases and all our, say, for example, we have regional documents in that region. How do we make sure those regional documents are converted or handled to be conversation friendly as part of a system? How do we make sure that we address all the local languages that are part of the system and so on? How do we make sure that that is streamlined and released accordingly? And Carrie touched on this significantly, making sure that we have the compliance and regulatory details as part of the project. It's very important that we handle them, and it's important that they are included in the team from the start.
And if I could,
sorry, go ahead, Carrie.
Could I just interject one more sort of thing that's specific to the relationship between the call center and the PV team, who may or may not be one and the same. These virtual agents are also very, very capable. If you have somebody who is basically sitting there and triaging a call, whether it goes to, let's say, it goes to a vet tech or it goes to a specialty veterinarian, these virtual assistants are able to handle that. They're also able to translate and to record the conversation as a source document, and to translate the actual call to text, and to parse out all of the elements that is needed if it is an adverse event case, so that you can have, let's say, somebody calls and says, I got the COVID vaccine, and it made me, it made me feel lethargic, and I had a fever and my arm hurt for, 42 days. the virtual agent can actually transcribe that, can pull that out, can use Medra or Vedra if we're talking about veterinary pharma, can use Medra and Vedra to code that, put it into an E2B XML, and to upload it into the PV database or the PQC database if they're not one and the same, so that you are eliminating the duplicity of data entry. You're speeding up the information going downstream so that if you do see a cluster of adverse events or product quality, things that just are not your normal things, you can detect those much faster, and it allows your agents and the people who are working in your pharmacovigilance group to actually do their job and not have to worry about duplicate data entry or sitting there and doing the data entry. So there's many layers, as Prabha mentioned, where all of these things can tie together. Thanks, Prabha.
Sure, thanks, Gary. So let me go over some of the technology challenges. I'm going to briefly go over it, and then Nico is presenting the technology and the tools and technologies. You will see some of these details as well. Training AI models in the right, there are various ways to train them, making sure that they have the information and they are trained appropriately to address all the questions is very critical, and that is one of the challenges that you will be running into. All your current documents, the source, the scientific resource documents that you are using to train the agents, the call center agents, to respond to some of the calls, they may not be in a conversation-friendly format, because the agents are capable of looking at the document, extracting the information, and providing it to the end user while they are having a very pleasant conversation with the caller. However, ensuring that happens when a virtual agent is communicating with the caller is a challenge. So we need to make sure that the documents and everything that we provide to the virtual agent are converted to be in a conversation-friendly format, so that the entire call and the experience communicating with the virtual agent has, if not, a good experience, if not at least equal to an experience that would be when you talk to a human agent. So we talked about training already, and our focus would be primarily improving the customer experience, and how do we make sure that we use the tools and technologies available to us to ensure that the customer experience is improved. And if you can think about all the various languages globally and regionally, and all the dialects, how will the translations, the technology may not be ready for translating medical terminologies yet. How do we make sure that the translation is accurate, and specifically when you talk to people in other languages or dialects and with accents, there are challenges associated with it. We'll also, when you look at, Carrie mentioned about a call from audio to text and vice versa, it might not be as simple as, ensuring that the transcripts are accurately translated when you're on a phone call. So how do we make sure that those translations are also accurate? And that's also another challenge when you factor in the language specific details, as well as medical terminology specific information, and transcribing them. With that, let me move on to the next slide, and Carrie will be talking about PV related challenges and rewards here.
There is no real out of the box plug-in AI tool or natural language processing that you just can plug in and it's going to work with your data. Every company is different in what their standards are, what the labeling is for their products. And remember, we still are focusing on compliance. So this is a journey that's crawl, walk, run, and fly. It takes patience and commitment. It takes a vision from front to from start to finish, to know where these milestones are going to occur and to be able to prioritize them. So setting expectations that this is not something that's just going to be rolled out. It's going to be very individualized based on what standards and what information you have that you share with your callers. And there are different types of calls, obviously, not just the adverse events and product quality, but different programs like patient support, patient adherence, and then the typical PV. So these virtual agents can be trained to handle as much or as little of the call as you desire, and each call is a learning opportunity for them. What we really do focus on, as Prabha mentioned, is the caller experience, because at the end of the day, that's really what matters. What it does allow you, what some of the rewards are, is that waxes and wanes in call volumes can be easily accommodated, and not necessarily by having to hire additional resources. You can use a standalone, but we prefer to use a technology that is sound, that can be utilized over a long period of time, so you don't end up with a system that looks like Frankenstein. And delivering, quality documents and quality service to whoever is on the other end of the phone. And it's not just about the technology, it's interspersing the human component. And Nico can talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides around the technology.
Great, thank you, Carrie. So this diagram hopefully kind of gives you a little bit of an insight into the different components that goes into this conversational platform like solution, right? We talked about omnichannel, so as you can see, there's a wide variety of different ways a patient or a consumer could interact with your organization, right? Through smart speaker, through web and mobile, through your medical information site, via chat, via even third-party app and social social channels, or more traditionally through phone or even SMS. And the trends in user behavior over the last year, especially with COVID, definitely emphasize that people want to interact and choose when and how they want to interact. And it's very important to be able to tailor to that need and not just force users to just go to your website on the desktop, right, to be able to get that information. And to support that, it's very important to consider those important components, right, in that architecture. First of all, the omnichannel platform, right, that's going to be the front gate and channel all of those different channels, and then decide how to define, how to initially offer the virtual agent through the conversational AI platform, or when necessary, escalate seamlessly to your contact center and your customer representative or medical information specialist, right? This integration is key to offer the seamless escalation, right? The user shouldn't really know, or there shouldn't be any friction in switching from a virtual assistant that's trying to answer your questions proactively to an agent, right, that's going to take over because the conversation warrants some more specialized answer, a more tailored answer that the virtual assistant is not trained for. And all of this backend integration essentially should be in place so that we can serve the right information from a number of different sources, knowledge base, cognitive search, platform, case management, so that we can get both the virtual assistant and your customer representative can access that information. And Prabha mentioned it earlier. It's a very interesting use case where those two, the virtual assistant and the contact center representative, can work in tandem, right? Where even when the conversation is escalated, the virtual assistant can now act as an assistant to the contact center representative, right? Through this kind of agent assist mode, where it's still listening to that conversation and trying to proactively pull information about that customer, that patient, if the case warrants it, or just search that knowledge base proactively, based on the questions, the patient, is asking for. So we can dive more into this if you guys are interested. But it's really important to consider those different pieces of that architecture, and to choose some of those kind of best of breed option that best fit like your needs and your technology stack and ecosystem. So some of the typical conversational AI vendors we work with, you'll recognize, I'm sure, most of those names, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM. Core.ai is also a very strong contender in that space. Over the years, over the last 5 years, I would say, there's been an explosion, especially in the virtual assistant space, of vendors providing kind of niche, like solution that provide maybe some pre-trained like conversation flows to handle specific use cases that maybe are industry specific. The challenge we've seen over time is that they're somewhat siloed solution. They don't necessarily always integrate well with like your backend system. They also don't offer the depth and breadth of customization from a natural language processing or speech to text capability that you would need over time to really expand and tailor the virtual assistant to your needs and to your end users' needs. So again, we have expertise, and we've implemented those virtual assistant across a wide variety of industries, including life sciences, and very interested to discuss further on one-on-one session if you guys want to follow up around the specific and the differences between some of those vendors and what capabilities they might offer. Now, in terms of ROI, the ROI for contact center is actually it's very common across different industries, right? But when we're thinking, and Carrie and Prabha talked a lot about the specific consideration for medical information groups, but overall the main challenges and benefits that the solution can provide are very common across contact center use cases. So when you think about the number of interactions per year, and the cost of a resource, picking up the phone or answering chat, you can easily look at how much that virtual assistant is able to deflect in terms of call or interaction volumes in general, and quickly measure that return year over year. And the more obviously you train that virtual assistant, the more use cases you handle, the more call drivers you're able to deflect, the more of that call volume you're able to contain within the virtual agent and measure some of those returns like year over year. So obviously the larger the operation, the larger the contact center, the more ROI you get, like quickly. And even in the large contact center, I mean, even by deflecting, like 30% of, the call interaction volumes in 1 year, I mean, can reach, like millions of dollars in benefit, like very quickly. So this is why it's important to really, consider and put a vision towards, like leveraging this type of technology. We've seen it, we've seen customers being very successful. It does come with putting in place the right technology, the right support structure from an IT perspective, right? It's not just turn it on and leave it, right? You do want to monitor the interactions. You do want to get a strong sense of how users are interacting with the virtual agent through analytics. But that also brings you a ton of data that you can use to better understand what users are asking for, what sorts of medical information we need to put together, what sorts of concerns might tend to pop up from a medical information perspective, or from different products. So it's a treasure chest of information that you really can leverage, because now you're doing all that analytics, that natural language processing on every interaction that comes through your contact center.
So what happens when everything is working well? You're able to get timely information and to address immediate concerns with the caller. You're able to detect trends, and if you need to revamp or to put out certain response sheets because you're seeing a number of different calls, you're able to pivot very quickly. You can even use this type of interaction at the point of sale. Think about the aisle at Walgreens for cough, cold, and flu, and how many products are out there, and then how many generics of those products are out there. You can actually use the 1-800 number on the back to text, and you can help a patient or a consumer decide what's best for them or answer any questions they may have about your product at the point of sale. The same thing, about the same thing with a veterinary office, the same thing with cosmetics. It can be a very valuable way to support customers and to help drive sales. And also, as Nico said, to gather a wealth of data that can be used in other areas. You get happier users. Nobody likes to sit on the phone, or nobody has time to repeat why they're calling to 3 or 4 different people before they get to the right person. And you have a more efficient contact center staff. People are working and doing the things that they enjoy. They're not so pressured by the number of calls that are sitting there ticking and waiting. And as Nico said, you have a virtual agent that is also acting as an assistant to a specialist or a healthcare provider if that person is the most appropriate one. So there's a whole host of things that can be done, including automating, as we mentioned. But it again takes some planning and some thoughtful discussion within your organization to decide what is the best investment over a period of time, and what is going to help me satisfy my callers who are calling in for different reasons. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eugene. I think we're good for questions now.
Yes, thank you so much. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the questions box, and we'll get to them in the order that they were asked. And let me just open up the chat queue here and get started. So first question is, what are the challenges with speech to text capabilities?
I'll take that one. I mean, it's been a long problem, right, with AI to try to understand, how to interact with human, and obviously, voice, is a big part of that. The technology out there has improved, tremendously, over the years, especially leveraging, deep learning, capability, and now the ability of cloud, computing, to train, some of those models. but it still remains hard in general for machine to understand all the other subtleties of tone and intonation, right, in voice, in different dialects or accents. So there's definitely some I think some improvements still to to make there, but it's very promising. I mean, when you think of how you interact with Alexa or your Google Home or Google Assistant, I mean, this is kind of the state of the art of the technology now, which is readily available and easily integratable in those types of like solutions. They think the research will still continue, but it's definitely very promising on that front.
Great, thanks. And I think you might have touched on this just now, but I'll ask it anyway. What are the challenges with different languages and dialects?
Yeah, so I think this is where it's really important to set up your solution architecture to allow for those components to be pluggable and to be able to pursue kind of a best of breed like approach, and not to just be kind of self-contained or tied or committed to any one particular vendor. There are a number of different vendors out there that kind of focus on speech to text. Some of the big cloud offer very strong models already. But what's particularly challenging beyond just the different dialects or accent is also the domain, right, that you're working with. In this case, medical information. There's a lot of intricate, or sometimes complex, vocabulary that's being used, right, that are not necessarily common in how those models are being trained. So looking for more medical specialized, models, that have been trained on large data sets of audios in the medical or medical information field, is definitely something that is important to to consider.
Great, thanks. Does it make sense to integrate a virtual agent with WhoDrug, Medra, Vedra Dictionary?
I'll take that one, Eugene. Actually, yes, it does. And FDA came out with some guidance and some thoughts on integrating Medra and Vedra with AI and a virtual assistant type setup. And what they found was that by doing so, that there was greater harmonization globally with coding of different descriptions of the same event, especially going down to the lower level term, and that it was a much more efficient process. Now, does that mean that you have to do extra work every 6 months when those dictionaries are released? Maybe so, a little bit, but good process control and looking ahead at what's new in Medra and Vedra can help you prepare for that. And it can save you a great deal of time and, again, leverage that harmonization globally so that chest pain or substernal chest pain, I'll use that as an example, or, my chest hurts and my arm hurts, all of those things, if this is what your organization has decided, goes to cardiac chest pain or, potential MI, or I'm just making up terms, but it does help with the quality of your data, which translates down the line with your signal detection and with your labeling review committees.
Great, thanks. So this is a three-part question, and I think this might be our last one, considering that we're coming up closer to the hour. But if we didn't answer your question, we will respond via email. So what types of things can be done to improve call drops specifically? Are there any solutions for reaching back out to the call drops? And the third part is, how do you ensure call continuation across channels?
Yeah, I'll take that way. I mean, that's a common question and a common challenge, right, across contact centers. The good part is that with a virtual assistant, right, you're not just put right into a queue where we're actually trying to actively resolve your problem. But in the event that you do need to talk to a representative, we can actually ensure first that we understand the best method like to call you back on, or to interact with you, let's say through different channel like SMS, right? You're calling, we're making sure we're validating essentially your phone number, and potentially proposing to notify you, for example, when an agent is ready to call you back, right? The omnichannel solution that I was showing in the diagram, in the architecture diagram, is a key component of being able to do those cross channels interaction, right? And be able to orchestrate essentially some of those callback, automated like callback or scheduling of a callback to your end users. It's not necessarily specific to the AI, the virtual assistant, in itself, but it's part of that end-to-end, like capability of being able to track customers' interactions, right, and their touch points, right, whether they called or started a chat on the web or started an SMS conversation, and be able to track those, together to the same user, so we can easily jump from one channel to another, retain context in that sense.
Awesome, thanks. So perfect timing. That brings us to the top of the hour. So we didn't get through all the questions, but as I mentioned, we'll reach out to you and get you those answers. So we'll be sending over the recording probably within the next 2 days. So feel free to review it again and share it. And if you'd like to reach out to any of today's presenters, their contact information are on the speaker's slide. So feel free to reach out to them. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your participation. Hope that the information we provided you with today was helpful. And thank you to today's speakers. And have a great rest of the day and evening.